Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Mr. Distinctions. If you are new to the channel, kindly subscribe. Okay, so this is Biology Paper 2 2016 GCE. So in today's video, we are going to answer question 4. Okay, so question 4 reads, Figure 4.0 shows fitting relationship of organisms in an ecosystem. So we have been given this fitting relationship in a certain ecosystem. Okay, let's go to the first question. Question 4a. Question 4a. Which of the named organisms represents A1, a producer, A2, a primary consumer? Okay, so when talk of producers, the key concept here is that green plants are the organisms which are referred to as the producers. What is the reason behind? So when talk of green plants are the ones which are responsible for the process of what? Photosynthesis. And the byproducts of photosynthesis, we are told, we have oxygen and what? Glucose. And glucose is a nutrient which is mostly used by most of the organisms in an ecosystem. So for that reason, green plants are the ones which are referred to as the producers in any ecosystem. So we can just check over here and see any green plant. So we can see that we have grass over here. So grass was the answer for the first question. What about a primary consumer? Okay, so what you need to understand here is that a primary consumer is an organism which is feeding on a producer. An organism which is feeding on what? A producer. So in this case, we have got how many organisms which are feeding on a producer? We have grasshopper, we have also mice. So we can either go for mice or for grasshopper. Both of them are primary what? Consumers. So we can either go for this one or for this one. Okay, let's go to question B. What is the primary source of energy in figure 4.0 above? So what is the primary source of energy in an ecosystem? So what you need to understand is the flow of what? Of energy. So energy firstly comes from the sun. Then green plants capture that energy and convert it into what? Into chemical energy. So the first source of energy is what? Is the sun. For that reason, the sun is the primary source of energy in an what? Ecosystem. So that is the answer for question what? B. Okay, let's go to question C. State the form in which energy flows from one organism or from one trophic level to another. Okay, so you have already answered this question. So the form of energy in which energy flows from one trophic level or from one organism to another organism is what? Is chemical energy. Because after solar energy has been captured by green plants convert that solar energy into what? Chemical energy, which can easily be taken by other organisms such as animals and the other living organisms. So the form of energy which flows from one organism to another or from one trophic level to another is what? Is chemical energy. Question C2. Explain what happens to the energy named in C1 as it passes from one trophic level to the next. So what happens is that this energy is reduced. What is the reason behind? After an organism obtain energy from the producer, that organism will start to use that energy in different processes such as excretion, respiration, movement, and other processes. And for that reason, that energy will be lost. Due to that, the amount of energy will start to be reduced. Hence, that energy, as it passes from that organism to another organism, will be what? Will be reduced. So that was the answer for question C, question C2. Then question D1, this is the last question. Identify two organisms in figure 4.0, which are both secondary consumers and the tertiary consumers. So also here what you need to understand is that secondary consumers are organisms which feed on what? Primary consumers. So any organism which is feeding on a primary consumer is called a secondary consumer. So in this case, snake is qualified to be called a secondary consumer because snake is feeding on what? On this grasshopper, which is a primary what? Consumer. Okay. Then besides being qualified to be called a secondary consumer, it is also qualified to be called a tertiary consumer. Why? Because when talk of tertiary consumers are organisms which feed on what? Secondary consumers. And as we can see, this is grasshopper, this is primary consumer. Then if we use this root, this is secondary consumer. Then this is tertiary what? Consumer, because it is feeding on what? On this secondary consumer if we use this root. So snake is qualified to be called a secondary consumer, at the same time a tertiary consumer. Also hook, if you can see clearly, you can see that hook is feeding on what? On this primary consumer. If you use this root, hook is qualified to be called a secondary consumer. Again, if we use this root, hook is also qualified to be called a tertiary consumer because it is feeding on this secondary consumer. If you use this root, this is a primary consumer, then secondary consumer, then tertiary consumer. So we have hook and what? And snake. So these were the possible answers. Okay, so using named organisms in figure 4.0, construct the longest food chain. So the longest food chain we can construct from this feeding relationship, we can construct it starting with the grass, because what you have to understand is that any food chain begins with what? Begins with the producer. So we can construct it starting with this grass, then grasshopper, then mice, then snake, then hook. So we have grass over here, then grasshopper, then mice, then snake, then we have hook. So this is the longest food chain we can construct from this feeding relationship. Thank you very much for watching. Keep following me. Otherwise, that is how we can deal with this question. Thank you very much. See you next time.